Hello and happy Friday. I am so excited for today's episode. I swear I say that every week, but I swear every week it's so true. Today, I am excited to talk to one of my probably BFFs that we've only met in person once, and she lives the farthest away from me than anyone. But Jackie Metzger is here today, and she is a master sound and energy healer who helps people seek deep healing and spiritual growth using a variety of healing instruments, her voice, and multiple energy healing modalities like EFT, Reiki, and IET. She creates custom, private, and group sessions. Her intuitive abilities help clients connect and communicate with their spiritual teams. She is also trained in more clinical forms of alternative healing for those who prefer a more conventional approach. She's passionate about empowerment. Jackie loves teaching others to heal themselves. She launched the Intuitive Sound Healing Academy in early 2023. So if you seek healing and guidance on physical, emotional, and spiritual levels, Jackie would be honored to be your guide. Jackie, thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thanks for inviting me.
So tell everyone kind of your journey of how you got to where you are today, because you don't go to school to be a sound healer, right? So no. So share your journey a little bit with the listeners.
Yeah. And I guess technically now there are schools for sound healing. I have one.
Sure, right?
But yeah, when all this began, that was definitely not on my life's path. So I grew up in a very spiritual household, although it was in a box. There were limitations to that. However, I grew up with hands-on healing. I grew up receiving readings and being able to tell my mom, oh, that space feels weird or whatever, and they would believe me and honor what I felt. So I was taught to
Which
connect
is
to the divine.
powerful.
Very,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, the more conversations I have like this, the more I realize, wow, I am really grateful that my parents did not squash that. It looks different now that I'm out of the box. And
Sure.
so, um, yeah. And then so we all have challenges through life. So lots of different anxiety, depression, OCD, other fun things like that. So just finding things to help myself. And I've had cancer, so that's a shift in your life. And then Lyme disease, that's another shift in your life. And then with Lyme disease, that's where I found Reiki was the first gateway.
Reiki's always the gateway, right?
It is,
Gateway
I
drug to
swear.
healing. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I love that. I love hearing other people's. It's like the Reiki story.
Yeah.
We're all introduced in that. Rarely is someone introduced into something else first. And it's a beautiful healing modality. And things evolve. Like that's the thing. There are so many modalities, right? And you just I love to learn. And so I just kept taking classes and classes, classes. And you find instruments that are part of that. Music has always been a part of my life, part of my family. And so that's when it really clicked, I feel like, with sound healing specifically. And then you buy one bowl, and then you gotta buy another one, and then you buy all the other ones, the drums and everything else. And now we have an orchestra.
Right. For those listening, I highly recommend having a healing session with Jackie. She is an amazing healer because she isn't just Reiki or she combines everything. And the sound healing is it's breathtaking. Yeah, my gateway to Reiki was, and it's funny, I think everyone knows the term. I'm always surprised when somebody doesn't. When you say, oh, I'm an energy healer, and they go, what's that? And I'm like, oh, have you ever heard of Reiki, right? When somebody says no, I actually don't know what to do with that, right? Because I just think everyone at least knows that. And what's
Yeah.
really fascinating is I was introduced to energy healing. I saw a therapist who used Donna Eden is a form of energy healing. She used Donna Eden energy, and I was laying on her table And it felt, now I'm a very left brain logical person, right? So I'm like, I need to understand how this stuff works. And I was laying on her table and it felt like she was rubbing my belly. And I thought, well, that's awkward. Why is this woman rubbing my belly? So I peeked and I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, she wasn't touching me. And I was like, that shit's cool. I need to know more about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met a Reiki teacher and I went through my training. And what was interesting is my mom passed away in 91 and we live in Massachusetts, and she used to go to a guy, and for those listening, I'm using air quotes because she would go to a guy in New Hampshire and he just made her feel better. Well, in 91 nobody was talking about energy healing, and it wasn't until I was going through my Reiki training that I was like, oh my God, my mother was having energy work done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But nobody talked about it and it was not called that. She just always would go to her guy and she would come back and feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even like how I grew up with energy healing, but it wasn't called that. And
Right.
then when I learned Reiki, I was like, this is what I've been experiencing my entire life. Like, how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
How do you typically work with your clients? What do people come to you for?
I mean, that varies, and I think that's the beauty of energy healing is that we can help support every single level. But I think, in the beginning, it was more about like anxiety and physical pain, because that's what I was experiencing,
Sure. Yeah.
migraines and things like that and anxieties. And then it's evolved over the years at this stage, the majority of my clients come to me for deeper spiritual growth, for wanting to connect to their intuitive abilities, to enhance what they already know that they can offer. And so it's just like my greatest desire is to hold the safest space for anyone to open as much as they feel comfortable opening to receive whatever they need to receive. Um, Safe spaces to me is so important because I have been in unsafe spaces.
Mm,
And so, it's like we've done training together and, we've had these conversations about how, being trauma informed or even just being aware and honoring where everyone's coming from and just again, helping people feel safe and held so they can explore deeper.
right. Well, because when you do the deep work that we're talking about, right, it needs to be safe because it, people aren't going to go and into the depths of themselves if they don't feel like you can hold the space for them and that they're going to be safe in that exploration.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know myself, I've had some not great, not so much healers, but coaches, right, that couldn't hold the space for me and couldn't,
Mhm.
right? And well, that's not true. I did have a very unsafe healer at one point, right? And it makes it really like, oh, whoa, whoa, okay. And vulnerability is a four-letter word to me, right? So if I'm hiring you, I'm really trusting that you're going to be able to hold space for me so that I can really explore and be vulnerable. And if I don't feel safe, then that's not going to happen. So it's
Mhm.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, and like in the work that we do in energy healing and coaching and all these things, yeah, things can come up that are surprising
Oh,
about our
100%.
and that can be really jarring. And so again, you need that space to feel to feel safe being vulnerable in and exploring that together to see what that's about and what can we learn from that and is this something you can let go and recreate something else
Right.
and so yeah, you need somebody who has experience with that personally and has been trained in a variety of things, in my
Right.
opinion.
And Jackie and I are both EFT practitioners, emotional freedom techniques. Most people recognize it as tapping, right? So, and that works at the subconscious level. And I would imagine you have the same experience with your clients that I do. They come and they're like, oh, there's this thing that I want to work on, right? And when we really tap on it, it really isn't about that thing. It's something so much deeper. Right? Like
Hmm.
it's because it
Yeah.
gets to the subconscious. Typically, our conscious acts are not based on our conscious thoughts are not really what's driving us. It's the subconscious thoughts. So we need to be trained as healers and coaches to be able to be prepared for whatever might come up because sometimes the client doesn't even know what's in there. I know myself, even as a client, I've been surprised at what has come
Oh
up,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I love it when it's fascinating when that stuff comes and be like, ooh, what's that about?
right.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that was there. Or I thought I'd worked on that.
Right.
Okay. And there's a new layer there. So yeah.
Well, and I think that's an important piece that, I had a client a few years ago. We hit on something big and she said, now what? I was like, now you go about living your life, right? Like there's no like angel, the sky doesn't open and the angels
Right.
don't start singing when you have these big ahas. It really is awareness. And now the next time that situation comes up, you have some different tools.
Hmm.
That situation will come up again. You'll just respond a little bit differently if you've
Yeah.
decided to take the lesson.
Yeah. And then there's new situations that come up to help you to learn and grow even more.
Right.
The
100.
tools, yeah, I think all these tools are so important to have. And that's part of the self-empowerment. I think too, as healers, we we want to you we want you to leave with some tools so that it's so you can help yourself.
Right.
Because I think there's like a saying that it's like as healers, we don't heal you, we just hold the space so that you can heal
Right. For
yourself.
you
And
to,
that's the
yeah.
important part. Yeah.
Yeah, when I hear people talk about I'm a healer, right? I do say I'm an energy healer, but I'm very clear and I'm not healing you. I'm holding the space so that you can do the healing. And oftentimes that's through self-exploration. There's multiple different ways that you can do that.
Right.
But and anyone who says I'm healing you, find
Not,
somebody else.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you believe that you have everything you need inside of you. Let's talk a little bit about that. What do, for those people that maybe this conversation is new, right? There are some people that are going to understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about doing this work. And then there's other people that are listening that are like, what are these crazy women talking about? I don't understand this. Let's talk a little bit about you have everything you need inside of you. Explain to people that maybe this is their first, listening to somebody talk about healing work. What does that mean?
Well, for me, that means that, let's, back up a little bit. So I believe that we're souls having a human experience, and I personally do believe in reincarnation, whatever that means. Um, None of us know the ins and outs of any of this. So just from my experience and my own interpretation is that we're all connected to the divine source, the universe, whatever we want to say. And in that source is all the knowledge of all, of everything. So, and we're a part of that and we hold that energy within us. And if I picture it in our heart, that's where I always like to go to is just thinking of that light in your heart, the energy of your heart, of your soul. You hold the blueprints of everything. And so when a lot of times people will search outside themselves for answers or whatever. And I'm not saying like we're not researching, of course we are. And we are seeking out healers and coaches and doctors and whatever to help us because we need a space held for us to explore what's already in us to find the answers. If that makes sense, I feel like I'm like
Yeah,
circling.
no, and I think I'll add to that, right? Like we are just another tool in the toolbox. We're
Yeah.
not the answer. You have the answer. We just have, I often say to my coaching clients, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to ask you questions so that you can maybe come at it from a different perspective, right? Because I can't tell you how many times I ask what I think is just a simple question, right? Like, well, tell me more about that. And then they're like, oh my God, I never thought of it like that, right? And it's because we can't solve the problem from the same mindset that we created it from, right?
Right.
So we
Yes.
need that other perspective. We need somebody else that isn't as emotionally invested in our story, our shit, to really
Mhm.
hold a mirror so that we can see it differently.
Yes, that is explained exactly what I meant to say,
And
and I
I've
love
never said it like that before, so I'm gonna go back and write that down.
it. That was perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, what would you say to people who say I'm not intuitive? Because that was my story for a really long time. Because I am so, I went to healing school. I am around people that, talk to their guides every day. They, have a whole spirit team, which I know I do. I'm just not that connected to them. But I no longer say I'm not intuitive. My intuition is just different than Jackie's, right? Than yours,
Mhm.
and then other people. But the people that are saying, I'm not intuitive, what would your response to them be?
Yes, you are.
Just bottom line, yes, you are.
Yes, you are. And exactly like you said, it's going to show up differently. And I think because of Hollywood or whatever, or all this, like, it's glamorized having being clairvoyant, being able to spiritually see. And so I know that, like, with my students and my clients, it's like they'll have a really profound experience and I'm like, oh, what did you experience? Well, I didn't see anything. I didn't ask if you saw anything. I asked
Right.
if you experienced. And so it's like, do you have a really strong sense of knowing? I mean, we say gut instinct for a reason,
Yeah.
because that is a huge part of us, that like visceral reaction that we have to people, to situations, to choices. But most of us, that has been taught out of us. And so we have been taught just to use your logic, and that's one part.
Right.
We have the three brains. We have the actual brain, our heart brain, and our gut brain. And so if you can link those three together, that's your intuition.
Mm.
And some of us are still going to be more on the logical side, but trust your body. And those of us on the more spiritual side, may have more, like you said, talking to your guides or hearing actual, your angels or whatever, but you just might know, and to trust that. Or you might feel, you get goosebumps when you walk into a room, or you meet someone and your heart, you feel like your stomach has dropped. Trust that. That's your
Right.
intuition. And that's what I mean. Everybody has it.
Yeah. I have a 17-year-old niece who I have just recently realized might have some gifts.
Mhm.
And she brought a friend a few weeks ago for me to do a card reading. And of course, the friend just wanted to know if she should get together with the ex-boyfriend, right? And of course, all the cards say no. And then I taught her how to muscle test, and that said no. And I brought out the pendulum, and that said no. But like going back to what we were talking about, like you don't come to healers and coaches for something you don't already somewhat know the answer for. You just, right?
Yes.
Like she wanted somebody to say yes, it was okay.
Yes.
But then I started talking to my niece and I was like, oh, you're really connected. But she hasn't really had that. She's only been, I don't push what I do on anyone, but she has been curious of, oh, can you read me cards? And I got her own card deck recently. And I brought it to a metaphysical store and I got her some crystals. And within 24 hours, she got really sick. Right. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, she really is very sensitive. Now we need to learn how to manage that. Right. So she
Mhm.
learns to recognize what works for her and what doesn't. And, where are you feeling things? Because she's like, I feel something in my, like she's sensing something in her space. Right. I'm like, okay, but you actually get to set boundaries too and
Mhm.
decide this isn't the time for whatever is happening, right? There's
Yeah.
so, when she shared with me about her friend reads tarot. And I was like, oh, she's so young, right? And is anyone guiding her? Because as you're opening up, it is important to have someone like Jackie that's helping guide you in that experience, right? I help my clients at a more at an older, like more feeling their bodies than
Mhm.
listening to their spirit guides, right? Like I do the where do you feel that in your body? Right.
Mhm.
Because that's
Mhm.
I'm a knowing and I'm a more kinesthetic. Kinesthetic. I always
Mhm.
hated that word, kinesthetic. Right. So I feel it in my I'm like, I can feel what my clients feel. I'm like, where do you feel that? And they're like in my chest. I'm like, yeah, let's breathe into that because I feel it there too, right?
Yeah.
But I don't hear, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but that is not hearing downloads or hearing from my spirit team is not my norm. My norm is like just knowing. It's just a knowing
Mhm.
and a feeling. But
Yeah.
it takes a lot sometimes to recognize that.
It does, and it takes practice, just like everything else. Now, yes, there are some people who are born into this world and they're so open and they're in touch with their their spiritual gifts, or they're so open and it's scary,
Yeah.
and so we can shut things down over time as well, just because we're afraid. And like, for me, I see and hear more than other things. So even when I'm doing a session and I have a physical reaction, and I tell my guides and their guides, and I'm like, okay, noted, can you show me and tell me, instead of, because I don't want to feel it. Like, you know, 'cause that's not my normal. And I'm like, whoa. So if it shows up in my body, I'm like, okay, I really need to pay attention to this,
Yeah.
because I see and hear more. And that's the beauty of this, is that we're all different. And each one of our dominant, if you want to call it a clair, spiritual abilities, your intuition, whatever, each one is needed in this world. And so whichever one's more dominant, two are more dominant, or whatever, that's needed. And like, if we can all hone that, then that's when we come together as a community and we can help to heal each other. We can confirm things for each other. It just creates that beautiful, cohesive experience when we honor our own gifts.
Yeah. And as someone who just has the knowing and I'm logical, it took me a really long time to recognize that that wasn't just my logic, right? Like I remember having a conversation with another woman who was also just a knowing. She's like, I just thought everyone could read people like I did. I was like, I know, I used to run corporate teams and I knew energetically how to handle each person. I just didn't realize that that was an intuitive thing. I just thought I was a good leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was my intuition that made me a good leader. And it wasn't until I started doing this work that I was like, oh, not everyone has what I have, just like I don't have what everyone else has.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to bring up too, is that in the corporate world, that was still a benefit. And
Yeah.
so, because I know I meet some people and they're like, I don't want to be a healer. I don't want to be a healing practice, or I don't want to have a healing practice. You can still benefit from tapping into your intuitive abilities, no matter what you do. In fact, I mean, that will only enhance whatever. If you're a lawyer, you're a teacher, you're a doctor, um, whatever, your construction worker, like literally anything and everything. If you can learn to trust your intuition, your body, how you experience the world, you'll be better at everything you do.
When I first learned Reiki, I learned my Reiki and then I went to coaching school a few years later and I used to run a team. Now some of my team knew I was doing this energy healing and coaching and stuff like that. Now, my management didn't necessarily know it. Over the years, I was definitely in the closet with my spirituality at work, right? I was very divided with my team, the staff that worked for me knew it, but my managers didn't. And one day, one of my employees came in and she was like, hey, my daughter has a headache. Can you send some Reiki to her? Or like my staff would come in and be like, oh, I don't feel good. Can you give me some Reiki? So I had like this like little Reiki session going on in my office, and my bosses just think I'm, working on the Q4 projections, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it really is what I really learned over the years with each job and each place I went, because I couldn't fight anymore who I was. I think by the last corporate job, I had crystals all over my office. I had, essential oils burning in the office because that's just who I was. But what it really did was it allowed people to actually feel safe around me and they could talk to me about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I had to stop not being who I was. Does that make sense? Stop not be right?
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
pretending who I was and just be who I am. And if my bosses didn't like it, well, that was their problem. If I was still doing my job, does it really matter if I have crystals in my office or I'm doing, Reiki on our employees that have headaches?
Yeah, because it benefits and it benefits everyone.
Right.
And again, going back to that, holding safe spaces, helping people come to you exactly as they are, knowing you're not going to judge them. They're going to be better at whatever they want to do as well. So it's just, I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm grateful that we get to do this work and we get to offer these places, and even the people that you meet. I forget, because I'm surrounded by people who want to make the world a better place.
Right.
And so when I get into the real world, air quotes, Sometimes I'm shocked. I'm like, oh, this is still happening out there? Excuse me? I thought my little happy world full of healers and coaches and people trying to make the world a better place through love and, working through their things. And it's like, oh, the world still needs so many more of us.
Yeah. What do you think? I've had this conversation with other guests, and I'm curious what your perspective is. What do you think stops people from actually doing the work or even being curious about doing
Yeah.
the work?
I mean, I think like fear, fear of what they'll find, fear of changing. Change
Yeah.
is scary for everybody. And, it's like, I think for some of us, it's like, oh, well, I have always been this way. And it's safe for me. I've proven whether you have a good life or not, because our brains are interesting about that. It's like you've created this life, this experience, how you respond to things, and it feels safe because you're still alive. But that doesn't mean it's what's best for you. And what if on the other side you could have a more peaceful, open, loving life, relationships, whatever. And I think too, it's like people want, oh, well, I worked on that. It's done. I don't have anything else to ever work on again. And that's not true.
Well, and I think
And
there's so much, and I think we tapped on this earlier, there's so much like pointing the finger externally, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
everyone else's fault, right?
yes,
It's everyone
yes.
else's fault because, going back to everything you have is inside of you and everything happens because of you too, right? Like you
Yeah.
actually get to decide how to show up in the world and what happens to you and for you.
hmm Yeah, I think the greatest gift that I was ever given was that thought process of um how am I creating this?
Yeah.
And just asking myself that question, or what can I learn from this? Or, because I don't, it's not a blame, because I've heard that conversation as well. It's like, oh, you're turning a blame back on. It's not blaming, it's just exploring and taking responsibility for your own life. And yes, there are some people who've been born into this world in horrific circumstances and others who have had horrific things happen to them. So, in that way, it's not blaming. It's just what can we learn from this? How can we heal in the best possible way? And to allow greater ease into your life.
What do you, this is probably going to be a controversial conversation for those listening, but I think you and I have similar thoughts on it, right? So those horrific circumstances, right? Often my belief is that nothing happens to us, everything happens for us, right? And people would say, well, why would I have wanted to be beaten, raped, whatever, fill in the blank,
Right.
right? And like I would never have signed up for that.
Right.
What would you say to that?
So, and again, yes, this is controversial and some people can get very defensive. And I have had some horrific experiences in my life, not as bad as some, of course. Um, it goes back to that, to past lives and alternate lives and being a soul. And so the way that this helps me is that I imagine myself before coming into this body, before coming to this world and being like, okay, my guides or whoever is like, this is the outline of your life. You're going to be, with these parents and you're going to have this situation, all these things. And as an eternal being, being like, ooh, I've never experienced that before. How can that help me in my soul's progression? Because this moment in time is a snap of the fingers in the eternal perspective part of it. And
Right.
then, we forget and come into these bodies and we're like, oh shit, time
This
is
shit's
not a
getting
snap.
real.
Yeah. And I don't have that eternal perspective anymore. And I'm in this physical body that hurts. And I have these emotions that hurt. And I have these disadvantages or whatever, or it's not cool. It's
Yeah.
not cool. It doesn't feel cool in those moments. So that's what helps me. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but
Right.
that makes the most sense to me. And that's in my own meditation and with clients. That's what I have experienced and have seen. Um, so that's the way that I feel. And that's not taking away any empathy or compassion for those who are suffering, because
Right.
that's real.
And I think, I talk a lot with my clients on like the sacred contracts, right? Our soul agreements. And
Hmm.
you're right, most people would not have signed up for some of the things that they go through, right? But I'm curious, and I'm not even asking you to necessarily answer this. You might not be who or where you are today if you hadn't had those experiences that you've had,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
My niece was stillborn almost 21 years ago, devastated our family, still devastating 21 years later. But as a result of that horrific thing, my sister and two other women have helped hundreds of other families because they started a foundation, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes when we're in the thing, the whatever the thing is, we can't see the the light, the beauty of what may happen. But as a result of some of the things that happen to us, there is beauty, right? I lost my job in 2019, not really what I wanted, but so grateful for it now. Yeah, and then a pandemic happened, right?
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
danger, Will Robinson, right? That's
Right.
only a reference if you're over the age of 40, probably. Um, but um, but like in the moment, it was harder to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then, somebody called up and was like, "Hey, are you coaching?" And I was like, "Sure," because what else am I doing right now besides painting my house? Right. So when
Right.
we're in it, we can't necessarily see it until we're on the other side of it.
Hmm. And I think that's why it's so important to seek out help,
Yeah.
because you can't, just like you talked about earlier, you can't see your own stuff when it's right in front of you and you're actually in it. But you can find somebody who's safe and compassionate and skilled in a way that can gently help you see and feel, process, and release.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna a public service announcement for um people listening. Like when you're looking for coaches and healers, ask them about their journey. Because I think it's important to know that your coach or healer, I don't think your coach necessarily, or your healer needs to have experienced everything that has to be the
Right.
expert in what you're seeking from them. But you want to know that they've been there, they've done some work,
Hmm.
right? Um,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah. Because I know something that's important for me is when I seek healers and coaches is that they also have healers and coaches. That doesn't mean you're like working right now with someone in particular,
Yes.
but you have a history of looking outside yourself. Same with mentors as well. So like, you and I both have taken tons of different courses and certified in lots of different things. And I want that teacher, that mentor to have
Have art. Yeah.
human teachers and mentors, because that comes up in the spiritual world, right?
Yeah.
Is that yes, we are connected to our guides, and I have been taught a lot of different things through my guides. And it's incredibly important that I have human mentors, guides, healers, and coaches as well.
Well, and I think there are a lot of spiritual masks in the work
Mhm.
that we do. People that are like, "Oh, I don't need a coach or a healer. I've got all the it right." And yes,
Yeah,
and that's ego. There,
100%.
there is never anyone that isn't going to know more or be more than you are. And if you think that there's no one out there to help you, that's your ego
Mhm.
saying, "I'm better than all and I don't need anyone." And
Yeah,
run from those people.
please. Yeah. Yeah. And if there's anyone who is like, I have the best or I have the
The only,
only,
yeah,
run away, because
right.
that is impossible. We're still humans and we have limited perspectives.
Yeah.
So, mm-mm.
And I think one of the things that's really important to point out as healers. So Jackie and we're both Reiki masters, we're both IET, and we're both EFT. You could have the same session with both of us and have completely different experiences because of the energy that we bring to the session. So it's really important to make sure that whoever you're working with resonates with you and is a connection, not just because Francine says, "Oh, you've got to go to Jackie. She's the best sound healer in the world," or "She's the best Reiki person," but she
Mhm.
also has to resonate with you. right? It
Yes.
has to be a hell yes, I want to work with this person.
Yes. I think that goes back to your intuition and going back to your visceral responses to people. Trust it, even if it's just like a little whisper because you haven't honed in it enough. Like there are so many beautiful healers and coaches in the world. And so, yeah, find who you resonate with most. And even like with me, if if I'm working with a client or students and they're interested in something else, even if I offer it, I want to ask like, you don't only have to learn from me. I'm grateful if you do. Um, but it's also a benefit to learn from others as well. You get these different perspectives, and then you get to hone it and create your own. That's part of that community is finding a good spiritual community with people who are open and supportive of each other, not competitive.
That's important. Yes. Um, what is something that you live by that you want to share with the listeners?
Oh, something that I live by. Of course, that just my mind go completely blank.
Well, I know one of the things, and maybe I'll just prompt you, is that you believe that you are loved more deeply than you could ever imagine, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
is that something that, like, share that a little bit, because that's pretty
Okay.
big, and not everyone may feel that way.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people who don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And so, I'm pretty passionate about that. And there are days when I don't feel that way. And so it's not like I'm definitely not rainbows and unicorns every day. Not at all. I'm a real human. Um, and so, but from my experience, from my own meditations, my own healings, and the spaces that I have held for hundreds, over 1,000 people, um, the love that comes through during sessions is so beautifully overwhelming that it brings me to tears every single time.
Mm.
And that is often the message. So I think, a lot of times people want these very specific, profound messages, but so often it is you are loved, you are known, you are safe, everything's going to be okay. But the main one is you are loved. And that love word in English, it's not adequately describing the feeling that comes through for that. And if it's true for me and it's true for you. None of us are better than the other. There's no most gifted or most talented. We're all different. And each one of us holds a special place in the divine. We're all needed, we're all wanted, and we're all loved. And so if we could believe that, even just a little bit, we could create just incredible things.
Yeah. Ooh, it feels like such a beautiful place to stop. All right. Yeah. I was like, what else is there? I mean, that is perfect, right?
Yeah.
Um, Tell people how they can work with you. And I know you have a little offer you want to give people, so just let them know what that is.
So yeah, I do one-on-one like we talked about before, and I also do, sessions and things for groups as well. I'm always offering different things. So when Francine asked me, do I have like something specific right now? I don't have anything specific right now, but I do always offer free discovery calls. And my intention, anytime I have a conversation with anyone, that it's a healing space. So even if we have a conversation and that's it, you're going to receive healing
Yeah.
and make a connection. And if you want to move forward with that, great. There's never any pressure. But I love inviting new people into my community as well.
Nice. Beautiful. So at the end of every episode, I do pull 3 cards. And today it's from my new deck because, the 70 that I had wasn't enough. So I had to buy a new deck recently. Oops, I dropped it.
I'm
And
the
it's
same.
Inner Child deck. I have
Beautiful.
3 cards. I have left, center, and right. So Jackie, I'm going to ask you, which would you like to choose first?
Center.
I had my hand on the center. I knew you were going to pick my
It was like
intuition.
before you were talking, it was like center, center, center.
Yep. My hand was literally, I was like, just wait for her. Oh, this is interesting. When I went through this deck, I saw this and there's a longer story here, but this is beautiful. Find your haven. There is a place of wonder waiting just for you.
Oh, that's
And I
beautiful.
don't know if you're familiar with, in Sedona, there's a birthing cave.
That's what I was thinking it looked like. Like
It
I've not been to
felt
Sedona, but that felt like a womb.
Yeah, there's
Is
a
that?
I just did a shamanic journey a couple of weeks ago, and the shamanic practitioner did it based around the birthing cave. And as soon as I saw this the other day, I was like, ooh, that's really cool. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. And
Love that.
then for those that chose left, accept what is. The act of acceptance will bring peace.
I love that. I love the night sky on that one.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And for those of you listening, you can go to the YouTube and see the pictures. And then if you chose right, I forgot which side that was, practice freedom, release the weight of judgment. That's
Oh, I
beautiful.
like that. And I like the rainbow in it with all the light.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even see that. My finger was covering it a little bit.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. Jackie, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for this conversation. It's been so much fun. And for those of you listening, thank you for joining me on today's journey towards a more enlightened and fulfilling life. I hope that today's episode has inspired you to embrace your inner wisdom and navigate your path with a renewed sense of purpose. Remember, transformation begins from within. Take a moment each day to connect with your higher self and trust that the universe is guiding you towards your highest good. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, download, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who might benefit from our message. Your help supports us reach more souls on their spiritual journey. Stay connected with our community on social media. All the links for both Jackie and I will be in the show notes. Visit my website at foreverchangecoaching.com for any additional resources, upcoming events, and more ways to stay inspired. You can also receive a resource to check out if you are ready for a big ass up level. You can go to my website to get that. There's also journal prompts there. And until next time, continue to shine your light in and walk in peace and love. I am Francine Tirrell, and this has been Effin' Fridays with Francine. Jackie, thank you so much for being part of this today.
Thanks for inviting me.